So, a little while ago, Aaron Taylor Johnson's name started trending on Twitter. This was because rumors started circulating that he was getting separated from his wife. Now, that wasn't the motivation for me to make this video, actually. I actually started writing it the day before, but I just found the timing really interesting. It's like a sign. I don't believe in signs, but it was like a sign. Anywho, the rumors were untrue. They're staying together. They're just selling their house. Welcome back, everyone. I bought a desk. This video is going to be a bit different from my previous videos, not that anyone cares considering I have 11 subscribers. I somewhat hesitated to make this video because I don't want it to seem like this case is the most egregious. This is just one case out of many. And I also hesitated because there is an aspect of gender to this that I guess is kind of weird for me to discuss as a man, but I realized nobody else was talking about it on YouTube. And so me and my almost no audience shall lead the charge on this discussion, I guess. Child grooming is the practice of an older person befriending a child or a very young adult in order to lower their inhibitions so that they can pursue a usually sexual relationship with them later. Grooming is being discussed more now than it ever was before, particularly in regards to people like Woody Allen, and that is great. It is a discussion that needs to be had. However, I do believe with the general public there is somewhat a disconnect between the perceived severity of this and the actual severity of it. The whole idea of being an adult at 18 has led to some concerning assumptions about the maturity of 18-year-olds, such as being able to join the military, gamble, marry, buy property, etc. It's this odd idea that the day you are legally allowed to do something, you're also mentally prepared to do something. This extends to the point that we treat the age of 18 as this magic number where people, usually teenage girls, are suddenly available for sex. The Olsen twins are a famous example of this, where multiple websites in 2004 were devoted to counting down to their 18th birthday. I know that the internet was somewhat new in 2004, but did y'all not have anything better to do? Did you not have jobs or hobbies or friends? What this reveals about people is that we start sexualizing children, mostly girls, well before they turn 18. People weren't counting down to the Olsen twins' 18th birthday because then they could start thinking about them sexually. They were already doing that, but now they can be upfront about it. To be fair, the practice of sexualizing children was not invented by the internet. Natalie Portman, Mara Wilson, Jodie Foster, and several other prominent child stars were sexualized well before the internet was invented and popularized. But there's been a trend that really took hold in the 2010s where children are expected to act and dress like adults. Child stars are dressed in designer gowns and suits and paraded around like they are adults when, they are children. Stranger Things was a phenomenon that helped to catapult the careers of its young cast, particularly Millie Bobby Brown and Finn Wolfhard. Millie Bobby Brown was subject to numerous fans, critics, publications, and other sources sexualizing her. W Magazine published a list of the sexiest TV stars, and her name was on that list. Obviously, it is never okay to call a child sexy, but the fact that a major magazine published this when it had multiple writers and editors who could have been like, this is a little weird, and they didn't do it, that's even more troubling. I'm not even going to get into this due to pop dust saying that Millie Bobby Brown is allowed to be hot. Okay. The article is actually much more nuanced than the title would suggest, but the title is still really disgusting, so the point still stands. What this reveals is that the sexualization of young girls is not a fluke, and it's not the result of a handful of perverts. It's a systemic issue that pervades media, government, and culture at large. And while that topic could make its own video, I have a different point to make. Let's talk about Finn Wolfhard. Finn Wolfhard was 14 when Stranger Things premiered, and he's 18 now. At the age of 14, a 27-year-old model posted an Instagram story about Finn Wolfhard stating, "Not to be weird, but hit me up in 4 years." And she tagged him. Now, I don't think I should have to say that this is completely inappropriate behavior, and a lot of people recognize that. Finn Wolfhard responded to this, calling out her predatory behavior, and multiple people defended him, including Sophie Turner. She eventually apologized, kind of poorly, and the issue was never really brought up again. But several people, mostly men, on social media found Finn Wolfhard's response to be unnecessary, for lack of a better word. They mocked him for turning down the advances of an older woman because they considered that a dream scenario, I guess. It's similar to when controversies erupt about women teachers having an inappropriate affair with their male students. Men get on social media to say that the child was lucky and wonder why he would ever rat her out. It's a sickness that we treat the sexual abuse of underage boys as aspirational. While the practice of grooming and sexualizing young girls is an issue that I'm glad we are talking about, the conversation often leaves out young boys. So, hashtag not all men. But this is overwhelmingly men who contribute to this culture. They are the ones who sexualize young girls, and they are the ones who dismiss the sexual abuse of young boys because they consider it aspirational. This isn't to say that women aren't guilty here, though. There are women on the beauty teams and the marketing teams. There are women journalists and editors and just consumers of media. And many of them also contribute to this by either being complicit in the sexualization of children or actively contributing to it. This problem is intersectional. I haven't really said anything about non-binary people because there's not really any research about them. And also because there's like 3 notable non-binary people in Hollywood. Oh wait, 4. Demi Lovato. Good for them. The reason I'm not talking about them is because I just really hope they wouldn't be contributing to this culture. I feel like they're better than that. Anyway, there is a conversation being had about how the sexualization of young girls is a ginormous systemic problem that needs to be addressed. And I'm all for it. I really am. And not to sound like a 4chan troll, but I have to ask, what about men? Young boys are sexualized a lot in the media, more than we realize. Whether it's Euphoria casting ripped 25-year-old actors to play 16-year-olds, or the previous example of a grown woman hitting on a teenager. I'm not trying to imply that everyone is ignoring this issue. I'm also not trying to imply that boys have it worse than girls. Many people in feminist circles discuss this issue, and girls are overwhelmingly more sexualized than boys. But there is this issue where the vulnerability of young girls is discussed at length, but not the vulnerability of young boys. Toxic masculinity is a phrase which is now controversial, which is strange to me because of how vague it is. Basically what it refers to is the way in which many boys are socialized to adopt unhealthy and toxic behavior under the guise of this is how men are supposed to act. This can include suppressing emotions, being overly aggressive, being jealous or defensive, a tendency toward violence, withholding compassion, etc. And I think an aspect that causes controversy around this phrase is that it can be misconstrued as masculinity is inherently toxic. But that's not really the case. A person can be traditionally masculine in a healthy way. I find Chris Hemsworth and Jason Momoa to be prime examples of this. The problem comes with the fact that many men are often afraid to show emotion lest they be considered weak, feminine, or, you know, because, God, there's nothing worse than being feminine or... So what does this all have to do with grooming? Just give me a sec, okay? Women are often treated as the weaker gender, and men are meant to protect them. This limits the ways these two genders can express themselves, but there's something more here. Because women are always seen as the ones to be protected, and men are either protectors or assailants, that leaves little room for men to be protected, and it also assumes that women cannot be assailants. Boys at birth have the same capacity for emotion and empathy that girls do, but because of how they're socialized, they're often taught to suppress these parts, meaning that they're not inherently tougher or more resilient. Men are vulnerable creatures. They need to be protected as well. This means believing male victims of assault and harassment. Anthony Rapp was 14, and his assailant was 26. I know we all know the name of the assailant, but I can't say his name without throwing up in my mouth a little, so. Anthony was a child, and he was vulnerable to an attack by an older man. Terry Crews, a man often touted as a masculine ideal, was sexually assaulted by an executive from WME. After he went public with the accusation, many people mocked him because they said, oh, he should have beaten him up because he's so big and strong and masculine. Now, this could go into a discussion about race and masculinity, but I'm not equipped to discuss that as a white man, so we're gonna move past that. But there is something here about the way we view sexual assault and power. While the man that assaulted Terry Crews was not as physically strong as him, he was a powerful figure in the entertainment industry, and if Terry Crews had retaliated physically, or verbally for that matter, he could have ruined his entire career. And that's one thing we need to remember about all of this. Sexual assault is not about sex. It is about power. The assailant wants to feel more powerful than their victim, so they violate, harass, and attack these people to flex their power or just feel like they have some for a brief moment. When we dismiss cases of men being sexually assaulted because they're physically stronger, we seem to forget about the personal and professional ramifications of retaliation. Men and boys can be just as vulnerable to sexual assault as girls, especially when they're young. So this brings us to our case study. Aaron Taylor Johnson is an English actor most known for his roles in Avengers Age of Ultron and Kick-Ass. Sam Taylor Johnson is an English filmmaker most known for directing 50 Shades of Grey. They have been married since 2012 and in a relationship since 2008. I'm going to go through the timeline of events of their relationship and marriage with no speculation or opinion. Most of the articles I found are based on statements from Aaron and Sam themselves, so whether or not they're entirely accurate is up for debate. They're also very private, so it's hard to gather a lot of information about their personal lives, but this is a timeline based on what information I have available at the moment. Aaron Taylor Johnson was an aspiring actor. He had done some theater work, some minor roles, and one leading role in The Thief Lord, which I can tell from the poster is not great. Then, in 2008, he auditioned for a role in a biopic about John Lennon called Nowhere Boy. He landed the role thanks in large part to the director fighting for him, and I suppose we can all guess who the director was. It was Sam. The film received positive reviews from critics, mostly for Aaron Taylor Johnson's performance, and he received multiple awards for his work. Not long after, he achieved commercial success and international recognition from his role in Kick-Ass. During the filming of Nowhere Boy, most sources report that they had remained completely civil and professional during the entire shoot, though most of the cast and crew knew that something was going on between them. In fact, many sources claim that Aaron was the one to pursue Sam. Sometime in 2008, Sam split from her husband of 11 years, but it's very unclear as to whether or not Aaron had anything to do with this decision. Immediately after filming wrapped in 2009, Aaron told Sam that he was going to marry her. Not long after, a year to the minute after they met, before they'd even had a date, or kissed, Aaron proposed, and Sam accepted. 1 month after their engagement, Sam was pregnant with their first child. In 2010, their first child, Wilder Ray, was born. 2 years later, in 2012, their second child, Romy Hero, was born. About 6 months after their second child was born, and about 3 years after their initial engagement, they got married and took on the last name Taylor Johnson. Aaron's last name used to be just Johnson, and Sam's last name used to be Taylor Wood. God, she really likes those phallic surnames, huh? While not too much consequential stuff has happened since their marriage, since then they have retaliated against speculation about their relationship. Aaron won a Golden Globe. They made a movie together called A Million Little Pieces, which was not good. They are, I guess, making a new movie, and they're selling their house, which is what started the divorce rumors in the first place. That's kind of it. I know it's not a lot, but as I said, there's not a lot of information because they are very private. But wasn't that fun, class? Okay, let's go through this. So Aaron was 18 or 19 when he met Sam, who was around 42 years old. That is a 24-year age gap. And while, yes, 18 is of legal age, I have already argued that I consider 18 a still very vulnerable age. And I actually don't have an issue with age gap relationships, but it all depends on context, and I really don't think this relationship had the right context. The way they met was that Aaron was auditioning for a role in her movie that she was directing. Not only that, he auditioned at her house because of scheduling conflicts with Kick-Ass. There was a power dynamic from the get-go. A director is always going to hold some form of power over their cast and crew. And see, this is my main issue with their relationship. Not the age gap, not how old Aaron was when they started dating, though I'm not about to say that that's alright. It's the fact that he was fairly new to the industry, and this ended up being his breakthrough role. You can argue that Sam was also new as this was her debut, but here's the difference. A film can relatively easily replace their lead actor with very little issue. There are problems with the cost of auditioning and reshoots and negotiating contracts and all that, but many films have had their lead actor drop out or get fired last minute and still been a success, e.g. Freaky Friday. However, there was very little chance of Sam being fired as she was very entwined with the project and had serious creative control. She was also well connected, having known people like Elton John previously. While this was her film debut, she had had a prolific career as a photographer before this and was quite wealthy. So, if something had gone wrong on Aaron's end, Sam would have had the power to blacklist him, essentially making it almost impossible for him to succeed as an actor. About Aaron being the one to pursue Sam. This is where we have to crack open the nuance, which I'm not excited about, but we gotta do it. Aaron was the one to pursue Sam and propose to her. So it can kind of be argued that Sam was not grooming Aaron, as Sam was not the active agent here. But first of all, these are statements from the couple, which means they could be skewed to deflect criticism. Now that is speculative on my end, and I'm not trying to be speculative here, but take every fact about the relationship with a grain of salt. There's another issue though. Someone who is 19 is going to be irrational, impulsive, and passionate. That is not an insult, because everyone should be that at that age. God knows I should have been. And think about a similar situation where a high school student has a crush on their teacher. It is common and natural for young people to develop crushes on their teachers or other authority figures. When you spend a lot of time with an older authority figure who gives you attention, you can grow attached to them. Now, I know nothing about Aaron's psychology, and I don't plan to try to attempt it because this video is already invasive enough. However, the power dynamic of teacher-student, step-parent, stepchild, doctor-patient is so sexualized in media that it has become somewhat normalized. There is a sexual thrill in being with someone older and more powerful than you, and I can attest to that. God, I really need to stop writing sex jokes into these videos because my family watches these because I made the mistake of telling them I have a YouTube channel. God, that was a mistake. There's also just the simple fact that intelligence is attractive. Now, we can go back and forth all day about what intelligence means and if one age group is more intelligent than the other, but there is some truth to the idea that the older you are, the more you know. And so young people can find themselves drawn to older people, particularly authority figures, because they perceive them as more intelligent, no matter if that's actually the case. And then there's just the fact that young people are hormonal. Hormones are so pesky, am I right? Ladies? So a young person being attracted to their superior is normal, and it happens for a variety of reasons. But in any case, the onus here is not on the young person, it is on the older person, the one in power. Aaron pursuing Sam doesn't make the relationship okay because Sam should have turned him down. She was the adult here, and just because there was this connection, so they say, it doesn't mean it was all right for her to accept his advances. It was clear from the interviews that this whole thing was irrational considering their rush to get engaged before they'd even had a date. You know what? Aaron had the right to be irrational because he was a young man moving into adulthood, but Sam should have known better. If they were really soulmates, which is a concept I'm highly skeptical of, but regardless, if they were soulmates, wouldn't the connection have been the same a few years later when they were both more established and Aaron wasn't in a position of servitude to Sam? There's anecdotal evidence of them being completely inseparable, this article from The Guardian states. I've never been on a film set with such a strange atmosphere. While the rest of the cast and crew are welcoming, Taylor Wood and Johnson seem oblivious to the world. This sets off alarm bells to me because it somewhat implies that Aaron was isolated from the rest of the cast and crew. While it's impossible to say if this was self-imposed or orchestrated by Sam, Sam clearly did nothing to dissuade it and almost encouraged it. Mind you, in this case, at this time, he was her employee. Imagine having this kind of relationship with your boss. After just 1 month of being engaged, Sam became pregnant. Now, premarital sex and having babies before marriage is not something I'm opposed to. I'd be a hypocrite otherwise. To the sex thing, not the babies thing. I'm gay. But mind you, this was after only a year of knowing each other, most of which time was spent in a professional setting with only like a month of romantic time. This is not a lot of time to conceptualize the idea of being a parent. Sam already had 2 children from her previous marriage, both of which Aaron is said to love and adore and care for well. One of them is only 6 years younger than him, but we're not going to get into that. Sam already knows what being a parent is like, and she has the experience. However, Aaron was 20 years old when she got pregnant. People have children at a young age all the time. I personally don't think they should, but that's not a discussion for today. And Aaron always said he wanted kids, so what's the problem? Here's the problem, dear children. As I said, I don't want to be speculative here, but there is something off about the order of events. They got engaged really quickly, a month after filming wrapped. They got pregnant really quickly, a month after their engagement. They had their first child 9 months later because biology. A year and a half later, they had their second child. All of this, and they're still not married. Long engagements can happen for any reason. You want to plan more, or you want to save your money, or you just want to get to know each other better before you get married and are legally bound. What gives me pause about this is that there was clearly very little planning to begin with. They're Hollywood stars with probably a good disposable income, and they clearly really wanted to be together. They both stated in interviews that they possibly spent 2 or 3 days apart in their 10 years of marriage, and that they're completely miserable during those times. Now, this is most likely hyperbolic and a joke, and it's normal to miss your partner when they're gone. But it's just an uncomfortable joke. Why would you joke about codependency and separation anxiety, or more likely just Aaron's dependency on Sam. So why is it that they move so quickly on everything but marriage? Again, not being speculative, I'm just going to leave that question open. Researching this topic was kind of strange because there's this huge gap between the established publications and the general public about the issue at hand. Social media as a whole is mostly in agreement that Sam groomed Aaron, or at least that their relationship is bizarre. That's not really the case with magazines, tabloids, gossip sites, etc. Almost all of the articles that cover this topic draw the conclusion that backlash against their relationship is sexist. And that is a good tactic, I must say, because although it's completely wrong, it's not unfounded. Age gap relationships are so normalized in the entertainment industry. George Clooney hasn't been with somebody less than 10 years his junior since the early 90s. Jay-Z was 33 and Beyonce was 21 when they started dating, and Harrison Ford is over 20 years older than his wife Calista Flockhart. The thing is, with all these examples, you can probably guess they're all older men with younger women. There's this notion in the entertainment industry that men are valid and attractive and useful at any age, whereas women are disposable and can be dismissed after turning 40. This extends to many movies casting older men and younger women as love interests, whether it has anything to do with the plot at all. And beyond that, older women are just not treated well at all, oftentimes because a woman's worth is tied to their sexual desirability, which is said to completely leave after they've turned 40. So when they're no longer deemed sexually viable, they're cast aside. And claiming that the backlash against the relationship is sexist is sure to get you the support of older white feminists and maybe some new feminists who don't really understand the nuances of the issue, and probably some others too. But the problem here is that you're using this valid argument to draw the wrong conclusion. The conclusion should not be that men do this all the time, so women should be granted that same right without judgment. No, it should be that this is a systemic issue with society that needs to be addressed and eradicated regardless of gender. This article I found helped me a lot with this video, and I recommend you read the whole thing. I'll link it below, but this is a quote. "As if feminism means the freedom to replicate the systems that have done us so much harm, but when flipping the script means mimicking systematic oppression, it doesn't do anything for the cause and has the added consequence of hurting people. Sam Taylor Johnson is not a girl boss. She's an abuser. Access to children should not be a reward for breaking your own glass ceiling." I want to add one more layer of nuance to this. We've got a whole onion at this point. There are abusers that know exactly what they're doing. They're hurting and manipulating and torturing these people, and they have no intention of stopping. I think this is what a lot of us like to see abusers as. Villains. Because a villain is simple, and a villain can be defeated. But abuse is not that simple, and in this case, it's very not simple. Abusers can often be completely unaware that they're being abusive, either because they were socialized to see abusive behavior as normal, or they've been abused themselves and don't really recognize it as such. I don't believe that Sam is being intentionally abusive. I don't believe that she can see anything wrong with her relationship with Aaron, and I believe that Aaron feels the same way. And that's what makes this so tricky, because if they're both so resistant to the idea that their relationship is inherently toxic and abusive, they're never going to examine it to understand that it's unhealthy. Even if they do get divorced, which is a big if, it's not going to change much. It will be a victory for Aaron and his fans, but it won't signal the end of grooming. Or maybe them getting a divorce will topple the patriarchy. We can only hope. So this relationship is not as simple as Sam is abusing Aaron, Aaron should leave Sam. That's what it boils down to, but there are so many intricacies regarding age, gender, intentionality, the timelines, etc. And reducing the situation down to its bare bones does nothing but give Sam and media outlets an excuse to call these accusations sexist and outlandish. I mean, they're gonna do it anyway, but let's at least make it harder for them. I want to take a moment to talk about the opposite side of this debate, particularly Twitter. So I stated in the beginning that Aaron Taylor Johnson's name started trending on Twitter after divorce rumors started circulating. And I looked through many of the tweets, and it's interesting. Now, this has been said many times about Twitter, but it's possibly one of the worst places for discourse. This is primarily due to the character limit dissuading nuance and the algorithm favoring inflammatory responses over careful argument. Twitter is overwhelmingly against Sam Taylor Johnson in this, and I do believe they have the best intentions, but the delivery is iffy. The streets are finally saying Aaron Taylor Johnson is finally getting a divorce from that crypt keeper. Y'all better not be playing with my faint young and extremely fertile heart. I know Aaron Taylor Johnson was spotted with his hag wife again, but I'm not giving up on their divorce. This how everyone finna fight over Aaron Taylor Johnson when he finally get divorced. Crying emoji. Aaron Taylor Johnson and his wife. Waiting outside Aaron Taylor Johnson's house to make sure those divorce papers arrive. Anyone want anything? No, wait, I heard that Aaron Taylor Johnson is getting divorced? And there's a meme of a black woman because that's all that Twitter is now, and a known transphobe, so I'll be there for him, with open arms and open legs and an open mouth. First glance, these aren't too egregious, right? They're little jokey jokes in celebration of them possibly getting divorced. But there's two main issues here. One is that some of them fall back on sexist words like hag, which I don't think should be used to criticize an older woman when there's so many other valid reasons to criticize her. But those aren't the ones I'm really concerned about. Aaron Taylor Johnson is an attractive man, and I don't think that's a controversial statement. So of course he is going to have people crushing on him online. And that's kind of how it is for attractive public figures. However, there's a line here that people on Twitter just seem to be barreling over. I'm concerned about the people rooting for their divorce simply so that they can have a chance. And I know that this is a joke, and I know that they don't really think that there's a possibility of them dating or whatever. However, instead of arguing that he should get a divorce because he's been groomed and he's a victim, they argue that he should get a divorce so that they can have a chance with him, and as a result, they resexualize him in a different context. I don't believe that this is their intention, but in these tweets, he is treated as a reward rather than a human being. Human beings are not sexual commodities to be passed around. This is objectification, and there's another layer to it because it's done in the name of helping a victim. I said earlier that I hesitate to make this video because I didn't want this case to seem like the most egregious one. And while that is true, I have another reason. Aaron Taylor Johnson is a human, meaning he's complex, he has layers and feelings. I know, it's really hard to imagine. And he has stated on multiple occasions that he is uncomfortable with the speculation into their relationship. I mean, Sam has too, but I don't really care about her. And that is a valid feeling for him to have. Even if you think somebody is in a bad situation, they have every right to feel like they're being intruded on. However, there comes a point when the problem becomes bigger than just this one relationship. If Aaron ever does see this video, which is incredibly unlikely, but regardless, if he ever does see this video, I do apologize for the things I've said that have made him uncomfortable, but this is an inherently uncomfortable topic. I've said multiple times so far that I don't want to be speculative with this video. I wanted to present the facts of their relationship and say what I thought was wrong with them. There are aspects to this relationship that I can't prove that just seem off to me. Like how private they are, the fact that she seems to dominate every interview, or the fact that he looks at her for approval. Isolated, none of these things would be like a huge hullabaloo for me, but because this relationship started out with this huge age gap and power imbalance, it's hard not to read into it. And so I understand when people are speculative about the relationship. Whether or not they go about it the right way is a completely different story. But the point is, no matter how you slice it, their relationship is inherently toxic simply because of how it started. And there's nothing anyone can say to me that will convince me otherwise. And this whole relationship is just a microcosm of several other issues, including white feminism, sexualization of children, sexual abuse, biased media, pedophilia, and several others. And this issue isn't just about Aaron Taylor Johnson. It's about Anna Nicole Smith. It's about Millie Bobby Brown, Sunyi Previn, Anthony Rapp. These people who have been abused and sexualized by the media and the system. I have very little faith they're going to get a divorce. They've been together too long without any serious issues, so what's the point of this video? I guess I just wanted to add more nuance to the conversation, because when the only place getting heated about their relationship is Twitter, chances of nuance are low. Sam Taylor Johnson is a predator, whether she knows it or not. That needs to be said, and it is not negotiable or debatable. I would also like to add, please don't harass them. I don't even know how one would, considering neither of them have social media. But if people go and spam their email or call her a hag or whatever, then there's a possibility I won't get to make more videos about sexual assault and Marvel. And we don't want that, do we? And it also just makes it harder to argue this point if you're doing this. But that's about it. I think I've said what I wanted to say. If Aaron Taylor Johnson ever sees this, I wish him the best.